In a nation forged through revolution and protest, some events cast shadows too dark to forget. Today, on Buffy's World, as part of our Illuminating the Shadows of American Hidden History, we're counting down the 10 deadliest race riots in U.S. history. From fiery clashes to chilling confrontations, do you know what's at number 1? Stay tuned and uncover the chaos that shaped a nation. Number 10. The Watts Riots of August 11th through the 16th of 1965 were a series of violent clashes between the police and the residents of Watts, a predominantly African-American neighborhood in Los Angeles. The riot started on August 11th when a white police officer arrested a black man, Marquette Fry, for drunk driving. A crowd gathered and protested the arrest, which escalated into a confrontation with the police. The riots lasted for 6 days, during which people looted stores, burned buildings, and attacked the police and firefighters. The riots resulted in 34 deaths, over 1,000 injuries, nearly 4,000 arrests, and $40 million in property damage. The riots exposed the racial tensions and social problems that plagued many urban areas in the United States in the 1960s. Some of the causes of the riots were poverty, unemployment, discrimination, police brutality, and lack of opportunities for the black community. The riots also sparked a national debate on civil rights, urban renewal, and social justice. Number 9. The Detroit riots of June 20th to the 22nd of 1943 were a series of violent confrontations between white and black residents of Detroit, Michigan that lasted for 3 days. The riots were triggered by racial tensions, social problems, and rumors of attacks that fueled anger and fear on both sides. The riot started on June 20th when a group of white and black youths fought at Belle Isle Park, a popular recreational spot. The fighting spread to other parts of the city where mobs of whites and blacks looted, burned, and attacked each other. The police and National Guard were unable to control the situation, and President Franklin D. Roosevelt had to send 6,000 federal troops to restore order. The riots resulted in 34 deaths, 433 injuries, 1,800 arrests, and $40 million in property damage. Most of the casualties and damage occurred in the black neighborhoods of Paradise Valley and Black Bottom, where many African Americans lived in poor and overcrowded conditions. The riots exposed the deep-rooted problems of racism, discrimination, and inequality that plagued Detroit and other American cities during World War II. The riots also sparked a national debate on civil rights, urban development, and social justice. Number 8. The New Orleans Riot of 1866 was a violent event that occurred on July 30th, 1866, during the Reconstruction era after the American Civil War. It involved a clash between a white mob and a group of black and white supporters of a constitutional convention that aimed to grant civil rights and voting rights to the freed men. The riot started when the white mob attacked the black marchers who were heading to the Mechanics Institute, where the convention was held. The rioters were mostly ex-Confederate soldiers, white supremacists, and members of the New Orleans police force. They killed, wounded, and arrested many of the black and white convention delegates and supporters. The official report stated that 38 people were killed and 146 wounded, of whom 34 killed and 119 wounded were black. However, some estimates suggest that nearly 200 black people were killed in the riot. The riot exposed the racial tensions and social problems that existed in Louisiana and other southern states after the war. It also influenced public opinion in the North and helped the radical Republicans gain more support for their policies of protecting the rights of the freed men and enforcing federal authority over the South. Number 7. The Detroit riots of July 23rd to the 27th of 1967 were one of the most violent and devastating events in the history of the United States. They were sparked by a police raid on an illegal bar in a predominantly black neighborhood, which led to a confrontation with the angry crowd. The riots lasted for 5 days, during which the city was engulfed in flames, looting, and violence. The riots involved the police, the National Guard, in the army, as well as thousands of civilians. The riots resulted in 43 deaths, over 1,000 injuries, over 7,000 arrests, and more than 400 buildings destroyed. The riots revealed the deep-rooted problems of racism, poverty, and inequality that plagued Detroit and other American cities in the 1960s. The riots also had a lasting impact on the social, political, and economic landscape of Detroit and the nation. Number 6. The Memphis 1866 riots were a series of violent events that occurred from May 1st to May 3rd, 1866 in Memphis, Tennessee. The riots were caused by racial tensions and social problems following the American Civil War in the early stages of Reconstruction. The riots involved a white mob, mostly composed of ex-Confederate soldiers, white supremacists, and members of the police force who attacked and killed black residents, many of whom were Union veterans. The white mob also burned down black churches, schools, and homes and committed many acts of robbery and rape. The riots resulted in 46 black and 2 white deaths, 75 black injuries, over 100 black robberies, 5 black rapes, and $100,000 in property damage. The federal government sent troops to restore order on the 3rd day. The riots drew national attention to the need for legal safeguards and civil rights for the freedmen in the South. The riots also influenced the passage of the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which granted full citizenship to African Americans, as well as the Reconstruction Act, which established military districts and oversight in certain states. This riot was covered earlier on this channel, and that video link will be at the end of this video. Number 5. The Los Angeles riots of 1992 were a series of violent protests and disturbances that erupted in Los Angeles, California, after 4 white police officers were acquitted of beating Rodney King, a black motorist, in a widely publicized video. The riots lasted for 6 days, from April 29th to May 4th, 1992, and involved thousands of people from different racial and ethnic backgrounds. The riots resulted in 63 deaths, over 2,300 injuries, more than 12,000 arrests, and about $1 billion in property damage. The riots also exposed the deep-rooted problems of racism, poverty, and inequality that affected many urban areas in the United States at that time. The riots sparked a national debate on police brutality, civil rights, and social justice. Number 4. The Manhattan Riots of 1870 and 1871 were a series of violent clashes between Irish Protestants and Irish Catholics in New York City. The riots were triggered by the annual parades of the Orange Order, a fraternal organization that celebrated the victory of the Protestant King William III over the Catholic King James II at the Battle of the Boyne in 1689. The parades provoked the anger and resentment of the Irish Catholic immigrants who faced poverty, discrimination, and hostility in their new home. The riots resulted in dozens of deaths, hundreds of injuries, and millions of dollars in property damage. They also exposed the deep divisions and conflicts among the Irish community, as well as the political and social challenges of the city during the Reconstruction era. The first riot occurred on July 12, 1870, when about 2,000 Orange men marched up 8th Avenue to Elm Park, where they planned to hold a picnic. Along the way, they passed through Hell's Kitchen, a predominantly Irish Catholic neighborhood, where they were met with insults and stones from the residents. The parade turned into a brawl, which spread to nearby streets in Central Park. The police intervened to stop the violence, but not before 8 people were killed and many more were wounded. The second riot occurred on July 12, 1871, when the Orange Order decided to march again, despite the opposition of the city authorities and the Catholic Church. The parade was seen as a provocation and a challenge by the Irish Catholics, who gathered in large numbers to block and attack the marchers. The police and the National Guard were deployed to protect the parade, but they faced fierce resistance from the mob. The riot lasted for 6 hours, during which gunfire, stones, and firebombs were exchanged. The riot resulted in 63 deaths, mostly Irish laborers, over 200 injuries, and more than 400 buildings destroyed. The Manhattan Riots of 1870 and 1871 were some of the most violent and tragic events in the history of New York City. They showed how ethnic and religious tensions could erupt into bloodshed and chaos. They also influenced public opinion and policy on civil rights, urban development, and social justice. Number 3. The Tulsa Riots of 1921 were one of the most horrific and violent events in American history, when a white mob attacked and destroyed a prosperous black community in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The riots were sparked by a false accusation of a black man assaulting a white woman in an elevator, which led to a confrontation at the courthouse where he was held. The white mob then invaded the Greenwood district, also known as the Black Wall Street, where they looted, burned, and killed hundreds of black residents and businesses. The riots lasted for 2 days, from May 31 to June 1st, 1921, and resulted in an estimated 300 deaths, over 800 injuries, more than 1,400 homes and buildings destroyed, and nearly 10,000 people left homeless. The riots were largely ignored and covered up by the authorities and the media for decades, until a state commission was formed in 1997 to investigate and document the tragedy. The riots exposed the deep-rooted racism and inequality that plagued the nation at the time, and also inspired many black activists and leaders to fight for justice and civil rights. Number 2. The Atlanta Riots of 1906 were a series of violent attacks by white mobs against black people in Atlanta, Georgia, that lasted from September 22nd to September 24th, 1906. The riots were triggered by sensationalized newspaper reports of black men assaulting white women, which stirred up racial hatred and fear among the white population. The riots resulted in the deaths of at least 25 black people and 2 white people, as well as hundreds of injuries and arrests and thousands of dollars in property damage. The riots also exposed the racial and social problems that plagued the city and the region during the Reconstruction era, such as discrimination, poverty, inequality, and political corruption. The riots were one of the worst episodes of racial violence in American history, and they had a lasting impact on the city's development and race relations. Number 1. The New York City Draft Riots of 1863 were a series of violent protests and attacks that occurred in New York City from July 13th to July 16th, 1863. The riots were caused by the anger and frustration of the white working class, especially the Irish immigrants, who opposed the new federal draft law that required them to serve in the Civil War. The rioters felt that the draft was unfair and discriminatory, as they could not afford to pay $300 to avoid it, while the wealthy and the black people were exempted. The riots also reflected the racial and social tensions that existed in the city, as the rioters blamed the black people for the war and competed with them for jobs and housing. The riots resulted in the deaths of at least 119 people, mostly black, and the injuries of over 2,000 people. The rioters also destroyed hundreds of buildings, including churches, schools, homes, and an orphanage for black children. The riots were fully suppressed by the police, the National Guard, and the federal troops, who used force and violence to restore order. The riots were one of the worst episodes of civil unrest and racial violence in American history, and they had a lasting impact on the city's politics, economy, and society. This riot was also covered on this channel in another video, and that video link will be at the end of this video. As we've journeyed through these tumultuous events in America's past, it's clear that beneath the nation's achievements lie episodes of profound unrest and strife. There are also common themes to most of these riots. Leave a comment with your thoughts on what those commonalities were and whether any of them still exist today. Let us not forget that these moments, while dark, also remind us of the constant struggle for justice, equality, and understanding. On the Buffy's World channel, our Illuminating the Shadows of American Hidden History series aims to shed light on these lesser-known chapters, not to incite blame, but to foster understanding and growth. We thank you for taking this journey with us, so please like, share, and comment on this video. And subscribe to the channel for more dives into America's hidden history. And remember, knowledge is the beacon that drives away the shadows. We'll see you in the next video.